The vastness of space stretched endlessly before the starship Aurora, its silver hull glinting against the darkness of the cosmos. Commander Elias Vorn stood on the bridge, eyes scanning the flickering stars through the transparent viewports. His mission was simple, at least on paper. Make contact with the Zetherians, an alien race known for their unmatched intelligence and unpredictable behavior. Diplomacy was the key. Words could change outcomes where weapons could not. But Elias had learned long ago that space rarely followed simple plans. As the Aurora entered the Zetherian territory, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the control panels. "What the?" Elias began, but the bridge crew was already scrambling, pressing buttons and shouting over one another. A bright blue energy net enveloped the ship, freezing it mid-flight. Every system shut down except life support. The ship could not move. Outside, a massive figure hovered, a ship unlike anything humans had ever seen. Its shape seemed alive, almost organic, curving like a gigantic crystalline insect, glowing with colors that changed like the surface of a living planet. Elias's heart pounded. "They've caught us," he said quietly, though it was more an observation than a panic. He gestured for the crew to prepare for a boarding scenario. Before anyone could react further, a massive beam of light enveloped the ship. In an instant, Elias felt himself lifted from the floor, weightless, spinning through the air. He closed his eyes as a strange sensation of being stretched and compressed at the same time filled him. Then suddenly, he landed gently in a place unlike any other. He opened his eyes to a hall of impossible beauty. The walls shimmered like liquid crystal, reflecting colors he had no names for. The floor seemed to float beneath him, and the ceiling arched impossibly high, disappearing into light. Sounds were muted yet amplified, like the space itself had chosen to bend its rules around him. And there, at the far end of the hall, stood her. Queen Zira. The alien queen was enormous, even by Zetherian standards, with a presence that commanded attention before words could reach ears. Her skin shimmered in a metallic hue, almost like mercury, with veins of glowing energy running along her body. Her eyes, twin pools of liquid sapphire, locked onto him, scanning and calculating. She tilted her head, and a sound that could only be called laughter echoed. Soft, musical, and chilling. "Interesting," she said. The words were not loud, but they seemed to fill the hall. A human, alive, unafraid, and silent. Elias straightened his posture. His voice caught in his throat, though not from fear. He had been trained for encounters like this, for threats far greater than anything Earth could produce. But even training had not prepared him for the feeling of being utterly unreadable to a mind that could see into thoughts, intentions, and even emotions with a glance. He did not speak. He did not move more than necessary. He simply watched, noting every detail, the way the light reflected off her body, the subtle movement of her limbs, the hum of energy that filled the space around her. Zira's laughter grew louder. "You do not speak, you do not fight, you simply exist." "Do you think silence will protect you?" Elias's hands remained at his sides. He shook his head slightly, not as a gesture of submission, but as a mark of acknowledgement. The Queen's amusement deepened. "Very well," she said, stepping closer. Each movement seemed to ripple through the hall as if gravity itself bent around her. "Let us see what a human can do without words." And with that, the trial began. The next hours, or maybe it was days, time moved differently here, were a blur of tests, challenges, and observation. Zira brought Elias to different parts of her palace, each designed to test intellect, perception, and courage. In one chamber, the floor was a mirror of shifting energy, threatening to drop him into a pit of invisible danger if he misstepped. In another, holographic illusions surrounded him, creatures that seemed real, roaring and lunging at him. Elias moved carefully, relying on his instincts and observations. One false step could have meant death, yet he never spoke, never panicked, never showed fear. His silence, initially a choice, became a tool, a shield that allowed him to analyze the environment with unmatched clarity. The Zetherians, servants, and advisors watched with growing fascination. None had ever seen a human behave this way, silent, yet completely aware, reacting not with emotion, but with precision. Zira's laughter rang through the halls repeatedly, but there was a new note in it, something like curiosity edged with unease. During the moments when he was left alone in the palace, Elias explored subtly. He observed the construction of the halls, noting that despite their beauty, there were weaknesses. Support beams hidden in plain sight, energy conduits that could be redirected, areas where the Queen's control was strong, but not absolute. His mind worked constantly, cataloging, comparing, calculating. At one point, he found a small balcony overlooking a vast city. Towers glowed with flowing energy, ships darted through the sky in patterns that defied Earth's physics, and creatures of all shapes moved along platforms that seemed suspended in midair. Humans had never seen anything like this. Yet, Elias noticed something. The city, for all its beauty and strength, had limits. Systems depended on energy nodes, carefully placed but vulnerable if disrupted. He also noticed the people, or Zetherians, going about their lives, focused on work and ritual, rarely questioning the Queen. Power was absolute, centralized, and unquestioned. And yet, even in this, Elias saw cracks. Pride often led to oversight. Confidence led to mistakes. That evening, Zira returned. Her laughter had softened, but the gleam in her eyes was sharper now, like a predator assessing a rival. "You remain silent," she said. "Why? Do you have no fear, no desire, no need for words?" Elias tilted his head slightly, a small gesture. He said nothing. The Queen circled him, examining him from every angle. "Your species is unusual, weak yet stubborn, fragile yet daring. I should dismiss you, yet I cannot. You intrigue me, human." He made no response, only held her gaze. In that silence, a tension grew, a quiet understanding forming between predator and prey, or perhaps between equals testing the boundaries of each other. Zira's advisors whispered among themselves, unsure how to interpret his silence. Was he cowardly, or was he cunning? The Queen, however, had begun to suspect that his silence was not weakness. It was a choice, a deliberate tool, and that choice unsettled her. As night, or what passed for night in the palace, fell, Elias was allowed to rest in a chamber that resembled an organic cocoon, soft yet protective. Even there, he did not sleep easily. His mind worked non-stop, cataloging every movement, every sound, every energy pulse he had witnessed. He began to notice patterns in Zira's behavior, subtle rhythms in her gestures, the slight hesitation before she laughed, the way her attention wandered when she thought he could not see. If he could remember these patterns, he could predict her actions. And in predicting her actions, he could survive and perhaps gain power. In the quiet of that chamber, Elias allowed himself a thought he had kept suppressed until now. Humans may be fragile, but they were capable of endurance, observation, and patience beyond any alien mind's expectation. He had been underestimated, and that underestimation could be his greatest weapon. Morning, or its equivalent, came, and with it, Zira's laughter once more. She entered the chamber and observed him, her expression unreadable. "You survive, you watch, you do not speak. Why, human?" Elias met her gaze without flinching. Still, no words came. For the first time, the Queen's laughter faltered. It was no longer amusement. It was curiosity mixed with caution. Something about this human, his silence, and the way he observed everything without fear or panic, made her uneasy, and that unease would be the first crack in her assumption of superiority. The encounter had only begun, and in the vast, shining palace of the Zitharians, Commander Elias Vorn knew one truth clearly. Silence could be stronger than any weapon. He would survive, not by brute force, not by pleading or argument, but by patience, observation, and a secret strategy that even the alien queen could not yet imagine. The game had begun. The next morning, the halls of the Zitharian palace shimmered like liquid light, brighter and more alive than the day before. Commander Elias Vorn stepped carefully across the floating pathways, his boots making no sound on the translucent surfaces. He had grown used to the impossible angles, the floating structures, and the ever-shifting light, yet every corner of this palace seemed designed to confuse and impress simultaneously. Queen Zira waited in the central chamber, her figure regal, her metallic skin reflecting colors like a living aurora. She did not laugh this time, at least not at first. Instead, she observed him, her liquid sapphire eyes narrowing slightly. Her attention felt heavy, like the weight of gravity pressing against his chest. "You have survived," she said finally. Her voice carried power, but beneath it, Elias sensed a question. How far would this human endure? He remained silent, his posture straight, his gaze steady. The silence was deliberate, every heartbeat, every breath, a measured signal of patience and awareness. "Very well," she continued. "Today you will participate in the games of observation. Perhaps you will entertain me, perhaps you will amuse me, or perhaps you will reveal something unexpected." Elias did not flinch. His mind already raced ahead, considering what these games might involve. The first test was deceptively simple. He was placed in a chamber with a floor of shifting energy tiles, each glowing softly. Across the room, a platform floated, suspended in mid-air. The task seemed straightforward: cross the room without triggering the wrong tiles. Yet he quickly discovered that each tile responded to weight differently. Some would collapse immediately under pressure. Others emitted pulses that could knock a person unconscious. Elias stepped cautiously, testing each tile with his hands and feet. Slowly, he mapped the pattern. Zira watched from above, floating on a platform of her own. She tilted her head, her expression amused. "You are careful," she said. "But do you feel fear?" Elias made no reply. He did not need to. His actions spoke louder than words. He moved with precision, stepping only where it was safe, ignoring the ones that could harm him. When he reached the other side, he turned to observe Zira. A small, almost imperceptible nod passed between them. It was not trust, it was recognition. The queen's laugh echoed lightly, more musical than mocking. "Interesting. You calculate, you watch, you survive, but will you endure the illusions?" The second challenge was more complex. The chamber dissolved into a holographic forest. Trees shimmered with translucent leaves, and the air vibrated with sounds that mimicked wildlife, though no creature existed. From the shadows, holographic predators leapt toward him. Tall, sinuous beasts with glowing eyes, snapping jaws, and claws that seemed real enough to tear flesh. Elias's heart raced, not with fear, but with awareness. He remembered the patterns from the first trial, applying the same careful observation. He noted the movement of the illusions, the slight delay between a creature's attack and the reaction of the forest. He sidestepped, ducked, and dodged, moving with grace, never panicking. Zira observed silently, leaning slightly forward. Even her advisors whispered among themselves, astonished at his control. The human faced danger and yet did not falter. At the center of the forest, a glowing crystal hovered. Elias knew it was the goal. Every step toward it required precise calculation. One wrong move would trigger another wave of predators. He paused, took a breath, and adjusted his course, moving in harmony with the illusions. Finally, he reached the crystal and touched it. A soft pulse of light confirmed his success. Zira's eyes widened slightly, the first sign of surprise. "Clever. Careful. You do not speak, yet you command presence. How?" Elias did not answer. Silence was still his shield. After the forest trial, he was brought to a third test, one that involved neither physical skill nor reflexes, but subtle psychological observation. A room filled with Xetherian advisors and courtiers appeared before him. They watched his every move, their expressions unreadable to most humans. Yet Elias noticed small details, a foot tapping, a hand brushing a strand of glowing hair, a flicker of doubt in their eyes. Zira placed him at the center of the room. "Observe," she commanded. "Learn who can be trusted, who can be manipulated, and who will betray you." Elias's mind worked like a machine. Every gesture, every blink, every pause was recorded. He noticed alliances forming silently, gestures exchanged in secret, even the subtle ways the queen exerted control without words. By the end of the session, he could predict who would follow orders without question, who might hesitate, and who had ambition enough to challenge the hierarchy. For humans, this was instinct and experience. For Xetherians, it was unusual. This silent observation and interpretation of behavior seemed almost unnatural. Zira's laughter returned, soft and musical, tinged now with something new: intrigue. You watch, yet do not speak. You learn, yet reveal nothing. How do you dare? Elias tilted his head slightly, a small gesture of acknowledgement, and nothing more. Over the next several cycles, days perhaps, Elias continued to participate in trials designed to test every human limitation: agility, strength, problem-solving, and perception. Yet no matter how dangerous, how complex, he adapted. He used his observations to predict outcomes, choosing actions that minimized risk while maximizing understanding. In one trial, he faced a chamber of mirrors. Each reflection altered reality slightly. The wrong path led to a trap. The right path led to safety. Elias observed the subtle distortions in the reflections, recognizing which images were false. Step by step, he navigated the labyrinth. In another, he was presented with alien technology, intricate and alien in design. His task was to repair a broken energy conduit. Using only observation, intuition, and careful experimentation, he solved the problem, activating a cascade of light that pleased Zira. Throughout it all, he remained silent. His silence, initially perceived as ignorance or weakness, became a strategy. Every action, every pause, every glance was measured. Zira laughed less often now. The amusement was giving way to curiosity, and perhaps even a hint of respect. Between the trials, Elias explored the palace quietly. He noticed small details others might overlook: a security system that relied on patterns of light, a communication network that pulsed with energy, even the subtle influence the queen held over her advisors. He recorded all this in his mind, storing it as a silent arsenal of knowledge. He discovered another truth: the Xetherians, for all their intelligence and power, had predictable weaknesses. They relied on routines, on assumptions of superiority, and on their belief that humans were fragile and impulsive. By remaining calm, patient, and silent, he turned these assumptions into advantages. One evening, while resting in his chamber, he noticed the patterns of Zira's patrols. Her pauses, her gestures, the moments when she was fully aware versus moments when she relied on assumption. He cataloged everything. If he ever needed leverage, he would know exactly when and how to act. And yet, he remained outwardly calm, silent, and unassuming. The turning point came during a trial that combined all previous tests. Elias was placed in a room where illusions, physical hazards, and political observers were combined into a single challenge. He had to cross the chamber, retrieve a glowing object, and return without triggering any alarms or drawing attention. Every step was deliberate. Every observation was measured. The illusions of predators lunged at him. But he anticipated their movements. The shifting floors threatened to collapse beneath his feet, but he stepped only where stability allowed. Courtiers observed from above, yet none could predict his exact path. Finally, he reached the object and held it aloft. The chamber lit up, signaling success. For the first time, Zira's expression betrayed her astonishment. She approached him slowly, her voice low. "You survive every test," she said. "You are silent, yet I feel the weight of your mind. You watch, you calculate, and you endure. Why do you not speak? Why do you not defend yourself with words when words could save you?" Elias tilted his head slightly. Silence remained his answer. Zira stepped back, studying him carefully. "A human, using silence as strength. I did not expect this. I laughed at your species, believing words and weapons would always dominate. Yet here you stand, untouched, calm, and unyielding." The Queen's laughter was gone now, replaced with a quiet, almost thoughtful hum. In that moment, Elias realized something crucial. He had begun to gain power not through force, but through understanding, patience, and observation. And that power, though invisible, was growing steadily. By the end of the day, the Queen dismissed him from the chamber, allowing him to rest. But Elias's mind never rested. He catalogued every pattern, every reaction, every gesture he had observed. He had learned far more than the trials had demanded. And in his silence, he had created a map of the palace, the court, and even the Queen herself, a blueprint of understanding that no Xtherian could anticipate. Outside his chamber, the glowing city pulsed with life. Ships moved like living creatures. Energy flowed in streams that defied human physics, and creatures of every imaginable shape and size worked in harmony. Yet within that beauty and power, Elias saw opportunity. Fragility lurked beneath perfection, and knowledge, patience, and observation could turn it into advantage. And as he prepared for the trials of the next day, he allowed himself a thought he had kept hidden. He was no longer just surviving. He was learning, planning, and waiting. And the Queen, for all her power, had yet to understand the full strength of his silence. The days in the Xtherian palace passed in a rhythm that Elias had begun to understand. Each sunrise, or what passed for day in this alien world, brought new trials, new lessons, and new glimpses into the mind of Queen Zira. Yet, beneath the surface of amusement and challenge, Elias sensed something even more important. The Xtherians, for all their power, had weaknesses. It began with observation. Every moment he spent in the palace, he noted patterns. The advisors moved in predictable sequences. The courtiers whispered in precise rhythms, and even the Queen herself, for all her brilliance, had habits. She often walked the same path when visiting certain chambers, her energy patterns fluctuating in a rhythm he could track. Elias did not speak. He did not act rashly, but in the silence, his mind worked endlessly. He mapped the palace in detail, memorized the sequences of guards, and studied the flow of energy through the halls. Every observation added to a growing understanding that he would later call the secret. The first clue came in the throne chamber. Elias had been observing Zira as she conducted a meeting with her advisors. Her words were sharp, calculated, but she occasionally paused to glance at a glowing device on her wrist, a small orb that pulsed with blue energy. Curious, Elias waited until the Queen stepped away to review documents in a private room. He examined the orb from a distance. It controlled not just the room's lights, but also the energy flow through parts of the palace. He noticed a pattern. The orb's pulses correlated with the power in the palace's defense systems. If disrupted, even slightly, the system faltered. This was the first hint of a hidden vulnerability. Despite their technology, the Xitherians relied on a centralized energy source that could be manipulated if one knew the sequence. Elias made a mental note. He did not speak of it, did not test it. For now, it was enough to know. In another chamber, he discovered more about Xitherian communication. Unlike humans, they did not rely entirely on verbal language. Their gestures, energy patterns, and even subtle facial expressions carried meaning. He began studying these signs, noting which gestures conveyed orders, which expressed doubt, and which were signals to allies. By observing quietly, Elias could now predict some decisions before they were made. When an advisor approached Xira to propose a plan, he already knew if the Queen would approve or dismiss it. This gave him a subtle advantage. He could anticipate actions, reactions, and possible threats. Even the courtiers who had once laughed at him began to shift. Their whispers carried a note of caution now. The human, they realized, was not ignorant. His silence was deliberate, a shield that concealed a mind sharper than any Xitherian had expected. One evening, the Queen herself approached him. She did not laugh this time. Instead, she observed him from across the chamber, her gaze steady and calculating. "You are silent," she said finally, "yet I feel your mind moving faster than any I have seen. You observe, you learn. But why do you not act? Why do you not speak?" Elias tilted his head slightly. Still, no words came. Xira's eyes narrowed. "A human, using silence as strength. Fascinating. You do not fight with words, yet you command attention. You do not move with force, yet your presence is significant." Elias remained calm. His silence was not submission. It was patience, and patience was a weapon he intended to use. The next day, a new trial began. Elias was led into a room filled with floating platforms, each covered in glowing Xitherian symbols. The task was unclear at first. The platforms shifted, pulsed, and emitted light in response to his movement. Stepping incorrectly would trigger alarms, traps, or worse. Elias observed first. He noticed that each symbol had a sequence, a rhythm of energy that responded predictably when touched in order. By watching and waiting, he learned the sequence without triggering any danger. Step by step, he crossed the room, reaching the center where a glowing crystal awaited. When he touched the crystal, it emitted a soft pulse of light, signaling success. Xira, observing from above, allowed a small smile to cross her features. "You continue to succeed," she said, "not by strength, not by words, but by patience." How unusual for a human. Elias remained silent. That night, he found himself alone in the observation balcony overlooking the city below. Ships moved like living creatures, energy flowing in streams that defied gravity. The city was breathtaking, yet Elias saw its vulnerabilities. The power grids, while advanced, relied on nodes placed in predictable locations. Interrupt one, and large sections of the city could be disabled temporarily. He cataloged everything silently, every conduit, every energy node, every patrol route. He began to form a mental map of the entire palace and its surroundings, a blueprint of potential leverage. Even more importantly, he realized that Xira's strength was also a limitation. Her reliance on control and prediction made her cautious, but also predictable. A single unexpected action, carefully calculated, could shift the balance in a subtle but powerful way. The next trial tested his intellect in a new way. Xira presented him with a complex device, one that appeared to be a puzzle of energy flows. Its purpose was unclear, but failure could trigger alarms and disciplinary action. Elias examined it carefully. He noticed patterns in the energy pulses, small deviations that others might miss. Step by step, he manipulated the device, redirecting the energy flows in a way that activated the system correctly. A soft glow confirmed success. Zyra's eyes widened slightly. "Clever," she said. "You do not speak, yet your understanding is complete. How do you learn so quickly?" Still, Elias offered no words. His silence, once perceived as weakness, was now a shield and a signal. It told the Queen that he was calculating, observing, and preparing. Over the following cycles, he began to test the limits of observation further. He watched Zira's court, noting rivalries, alliances, and subtle hints of ambition. Certain advisors had loyalties stronger than others. Some courtiers whispered secrets in hidden corners. Every gesture, every glance, every subtle signal carried meaning. Elias cataloged them all, silently learning not just the palace layout and technology, but the people within it. He realized that understanding the court was as important as understanding the Queen. Influence came not from force, but from knowing the hidden rules and rhythms that governed every action. By the end of the cycle, he had not only survived the trials, but also mapped the palace, the energy flows, and the court itself. His silent observation had given him a hidden advantage, one that even Zira had not anticipated. The turning point came when Elias discovered the Zetherian energy nodes themselves. While exploring the palace corridors, he noticed a faint hum, barely perceptible. Following it, he found a small chamber where the nodes converged. The energy pulsed rhythmically, feeding power to the entire sector of the palace. He studied the patterns carefully. A disruption at just the right moment could temporarily disable a large portion of the palace systems. It was not a weapon for destruction, but a tool, a way to create leverage without violence. For the first time, he allowed himself a small smile. The secret he had been gathering, quietly and patiently, had taken shape. His silence had been more than endurance. It had been preparation. That evening, Zira appeared unexpectedly in his chamber. She did not speak at first. Her eyes, however, revealed her thoughts, curiosity, caution, and the first hint of respect. "You continue to observe," she said finally. "You learn, and yet you reveal nothing. It is unsettling." Elias remained silent. The Queen circled him slowly, studying his posture, his eyes, his gestures. "A human, silent yet calculating. I laughed at you once. I thought your species weak, limited, simple. But now, I wonder if I underestimated you." Still, no words came from Elias. His mind had worked silently for days, cataloging, analyzing, and preparing. The Queen's amusement had become intrigue, and her confidence in her control had begun to waver. In the quiet hours of the night, Elias reflected on what he had learned. The Zetherians, for all their brilliance, relied heavily on patterns, control, and predictability. Their technology, while advanced, had limits. Their court, while loyal, was not immune to influence. And the Queen herself, powerful and proud, had blind spots, subtle vulnerabilities in both mind and palace. He had discovered the secret not through words or force, but through patience, observation, and careful calculation. Silence had been his shield, his lens, and his weapon, and soon he realized the time would come to reveal that secret. For now, he rested, still silent, still calm, and more prepared than ever. The Queen had laughed at him once. She had mocked his silence. But soon, she would learn that silence could be stronger than any weapon, and intelligence could outmaneuver power in ways she could not yet imagine. The game had evolved. The Queen's amusement had become curiosity, and Elias, the silent observer, was ready to take the next step. The palace glowed in a soft, shifting light as Commander Elias Vorn walked through the corridors. His mind worked faster than ever, cataloging every pattern, every patrol, every energy pulse. He had learned the secrets of the Zitharians, their strengths, their weaknesses, and the way their power truly operated. Now the time had come to see how far his knowledge could go. Queen Zira waited in the central chamber, her metallic form reflecting every color of the palace lights. She did not smile, nor did she laugh. Her eyes, twin pools of liquid sapphire, studied him with intensity. She had begun to sense that this human was more than he seemed, and the thought unsettled her. "You have observed," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "You have endured. You have learned much. Yet, I do not know what you truly seek. Why do you remain silent?" Elias tilted his head slightly, still no words. The silence itself seemed to answer more than any speech could. It told her that he was confident, aware, and patient, and it told her that he was not yet done. The first stage of the revelation came in the court chamber. Zira had summoned her most trusted advisors to witness the human's trial. This time it was not a test of reflexes or intellect. Instead, she presented a scenario, a strategic simulation where she expected humans to fail, to reveal weakness in thinking and action. The simulation involved a holographic representation of a planetary system under threat. Ships, defenses, and energy nodes were projected into the chamber, and the advisors expected the human to act impulsively, as his species was believed to do. Elias observed first. He did not rush. He did not panic. He studied the simulation, tracing patterns in the Zitharian fleet, noting the precise energy flows that powered the defenses. The advisors whispered among themselves. They had never seen a human remain so calm under pressure. Finally, he acted, not with words, not with aggression, but with deliberate gestures and movements. He reconfigured the holographic nodes, redirecting energy to create balance and efficiency in the defenses. Where the simulation had predicted chaos, Elias created order. The advisors gasped. Zira's eyes narrowed. For the first time, the queen felt uncertainty. The human had done what she believed impossible. He had improved a system she designed herself, not with alien technology, but with logic, observation, and patience. After the simulation, Zira led him to a chamber deep within the palace. Here, the energy nodes that powered entire districts converged in a crystalline nexus. Elias had discovered this chamber during his silent explorations, noting the patterns and vulnerabilities in the energy flows. "You know this place," Zira said, her voice measured but tinged with curiosity. "You should not. No outsider has ever reached it without guidance. How did you find it?" Elias remained silent. He stepped closer to the nexus, studying the pulsing energy. With careful, deliberate movements, he adjusted a conduit that controlled a minor sector of the palace. A soft hum filled the room, confirming the change. Zira's eyes widened. "You understand the network? You know its weaknesses. How?" Still no words. The queen felt something she had never experienced before, a flicker of doubt. The human's silence was no longer harmless. It had become a tool, a force that could challenge her control without a single word. The true revelation came when Elias subtly demonstrated the vulnerability of the energy grid. He did not destroy or damage anything, but he showed, with careful gestures, that a single sequence of manipulations could temporarily redirect power flows, leaving major sectors momentarily offline. Zira's sapphire eyes widened in shock. "Impossible," she whispered. "Only a human could see what we take for granted. Only a mind unshackled by pride could notice this." Elias did not answer. The silence itself carried the message. He had learned, he had observed, and he could act. The queen had underestimated him. And now she faced the consequence of that misjudgment. The court gathered to witness the next demonstration. Elias was placed in a strategic control room, surrounded by holographic displays, energy grids, and simulations of planetary defense systems. The challenge was simple in appearance: maintain stability under pressure. The advisors expected failure. Elias worked silently, adjusting nodes, rerouting energy, and anticipating patterns before they unfolded. Where others would panic, he acted with precision. Where the Zetherians relied on brute calculation, he relied on observation and intuition. By the end of the session, he had stabilized systems that were predicted to collapse under stress. The room fell silent. Zira's usual laughter was gone. She studied him closely, realizing that the human had not only survived, but now possessed knowledge that rivaled even her own understanding of the palace's systems. She began, but paused. Words failed her. She had laughed at him, mocked his silence, and believed him powerless. Yet here he stood, demonstrating mastery that no one had expected. Later, as the palace quieted, Zira approached him privately. Her voice was low, almost reverent. "I have underestimated you, human. I laughed at your silence, thinking it weakness. But now I see it is strength, a strength I did not anticipate." Elias remained silent. His mind was already planning the next steps, considering possibilities, weighing outcomes, and calculating the best way to leverage his understanding without aggression. The queen circled him, her gaze piercing. "You have discovered secrets that could topple systems, influence my court, even challenge my authority. And yet, you do not act with malice. Why?" He did not answer. His silence spoke again. Patience, observation, and strategy. Power could be revealed in many forms, and words or violence were not always necessary. The following days were tense. Zira began to watch him more closely, no longer mocking, but analyzing. She noticed how he moved through the palace, how he observed the courtiers, and how his gestures subtly communicated with the energy nodes and mechanisms he had mastered. The human was no longer a prisoner or curiosity. He had become a strategist, a force hidden behind silence. Even the advisors whispered in awe and caution, unsure how to interpret this quiet observer. Elias, meanwhile, continued to study the court. He noted rivalries, alliances, and subtle signs of ambition. Certain advisors had loyalties stronger than others. Some courtiers whispered secrets in corners, and the queen herself had habits and predictable moments. Every detail added to his growing map of the palace's internal structure. One evening, Elias discovered an old chamber filled with ancient Zetherian texts and holographic records. Here, he learned of a prophecy, a legend of a silent observer who would challenge the established order and bring unforeseen change. The words confirmed what he had suspected. His silence had been misunderstood, but it was not meaningless. In their mythology, a silent strategist was rare and powerful. Humans were not mentioned often, but the prophecy suggested that one who watched without speaking could alter the course of events without violence. Elias allowed himself a small, private smile. His silence had been a shield, a lens, and now a key to influence. He was not merely surviving. He was preparing to change the balance of power in a palace that had believed itself unchallengeable. The final demonstration of Part 4 came when Elias subtly rerouted energy in a minor sector of the palace, creating a controlled anomaly. Lights flickered, minor systems paused, and even a few ships in the docking area stalled briefly. No damage was done, no threat to life occurred. But the demonstration was enough. Zira observed, her expression unreadable, yet her eyes betrayed something new, respect mixed with wariness. You are not what I expected," she admitted. "Your silence is a weapon. Your patience, a power I did not anticipate. You have shown me that intelligence can outmatch pride, observation can outmaneuver control, and patience can rival strength." Elias remained silent. No words were needed. His secret, the knowledge of Zitharian vulnerabilities, the careful observation of court politics, and the mastery of their energy systems, was now evident. The queen had finally realized that she had underestimated him. That night, as he rested in his chamber, Elias reflected on the progress he had made. The queen's laughter had vanished, replaced by calculation and curiosity. The court had shifted from amusement to caution, and his understanding of the palace, the energy flows, and the political dynamics had grown beyond simple survival. He was no longer merely a prisoner or a guest. He was a silent strategist, a force to be reckoned with, and soon the full impact of his knowledge would be revealed. For now, he allowed himself a thought he had kept hidden. The queen had laughed at him once, believing his silence weakness. Soon, she would understand that the silence of a human could be stronger than any weapon, sharper than any blade, and more dangerous than any army. The revelation was complete. The queen's amusement had turned to respect, and the balance of power within the palace had begun to shift. The silent observer was ready. The game had entered a new stage, and the next move would determine the course of history for humans and Zitharians alike. The palace of the Zitharians pulsed with quiet energy as Commander Elias Vorn stepped into the central chamber. The light shimmered off the crystalline walls, casting a rainbow of colors across the floor. Every detail, every vibration of the energy nodes, every whisper in the court was already catalogued in his mind. He had waited patiently, he had observed quietly, and now the moment had come to act, not with violence, but with intelligence. Queen Zira stood on her elevated platform, her sapphire eyes fixed on him. There was no amusement in her expression anymore, only caution, curiosity, and perhaps a hint of respect. She had begun to understand that the human she had laughed at was no ordinary creature. "You have learned much," she said, her voice calm yet commanding. "You have observed, endured, and adapted. But now, I wonder, will you act? Will you speak? Or will you remain silent?" Elias remained silent. His mind already moved faster than words could. Silence had been his weapon, his shield, and now it would become his advantage. The first demonstration came subtly. Elias walked toward one of the palace energy nodes, a key point he had discovered in his explorations. With careful gestures, he adjusted the flow of energy, redirecting a small portion from the city's defense grid. Nothing exploded. Nothing was damaged, yet the impact was immediate. Some of the automated systems paused, security drones shifted their patterns, and a few court advisors blinked in confusion. The queen's eyes widened. "You understand this system better than anyone else," she said. "How can one human master what even our best engineers cannot?" Elias did not answer. He allowed his actions to speak. Each adjustment, each subtle manipulation demonstrated a truth. Knowledge and patience could surpass power and pride. Next, he moved to the council chamber where the advisors had gathered, still unsure of what the human intended. He gestured toward the holographic projections of planetary defenses. With careful, precise movements, he reconfigured them, balancing energy flows in a way that strengthened defenses while revealing vulnerabilities in enemy systems. The advisors whispered among themselves. None could deny the intelligence and foresight displayed. Even the queen's most loyal followers began to realize that Elias's silence was not ignorance. It was strategy, observation, and mastery beyond expectation. "You have done what we thought impossible," Zira said, her voice quieter now, carrying an edge of awe. "Your silence is not weakness. It is strength." Elias tilted his head slightly. Still, no words. The court watched in astonishment as he continued. Every move he made, every adjustment he demonstrated, revealed not only his knowledge of the palace's systems, but also the inner workings of Xitherian politics. He subtly exposed rivalries and hidden ambitions, carefully guiding attention without accusation or confrontation. The queen, forced to acknowledge the human's mastery, began to act differently. She no longer mocked, no longer underestimated him. Instead, she observed, learned, and calculated her responses. For the first time in her reign, she faced someone whose mind could match her own, whose silence carried more weight than any words or orders. Elias's quiet actions sent a message to the entire court. Humans, though small and seemingly fragile, could possess intelligence and patience capable of rivaling even the most advanced alien minds. Later, in a private audience with Xyra, Elias demonstrated the final piece of his strategy. He subtly activated a sequence that revealed the vulnerabilities in the city's energy grid. Systems paused briefly, lights flickered, and minor automated processes halted, without causing harm. It was enough for the queen to realize the truth. The human she had laughed at could influence the palace and the city without a single spoken word. You could disrupt everything," she said, her voice calm but carrying disbelief. "Yet you choose not to. Why?" Elias remained silent. His silence conveyed patience, strategy, and the unspoken understanding that knowledge without violence could command respect and achieve influence. The queen's eyes softened. "A human, using silence as power. I misjudged you. I laughed at you once. I mocked your species. Yet now, I see that humans, fragile though you may seem, possess a strength I cannot ignore." The turning point came when Elias subtly guided Xyra through a demonstration. Without a word, he moved through the palace systems, showing how energy could be balanced and threats mitigated with careful observation. Each action highlighted human ingenuity, observation, patience, and intelligence working in harmony. The queen followed his movements, her eyes wide with realization. She had underestimated the human mind, assuming that words and brute force were the only tools of influence. Yet here stood a human who commanded attention, respect, and power, all without speaking. "You have changed my perception," Xyra admitted, her tone softening. "You have shown me that strength is not only in power, technology, or words. It is also in patience, observation, and understanding. Your silence has taught me more than 1,000 advisors could." Elias remained silent. The court began to murmur, observing the shift in the queen's demeanor. The advisors, once confident in their superiority, now watched with awe. The human's silent actions had demonstrated mastery over technology, strategy, and influence. His knowledge of the palace, energy systems, and political patterns revealed that intelligence, patience, and observation could surpass even the greatest displays of power. For the first time, the queen's pride was tempered by respect. She realized that the human's silence had been misunderstood. What she had seen as weakness was, in fact, wisdom and strategy. In the days that followed, Elias continued his work. He did not speak, yet his influence grew. Energy systems ran more efficiently, defenses were subtly strengthened, and court rivalries became manageable under his quiet guidance. Xitherians began to approach him with questions, not because he demanded it, but because his actions demonstrated understanding and insight beyond expectation. Xyra observed silently, learning from him, and slowly, a bond of mutual respect formed. The queen who had laughed at him now acknowledged his intellect, patience, and strategic brilliance. Finally, the moment of recognition arrived. Xyra summoned the court for a public audience. Elias was brought before the gathered Xitherians. The energy in the chamber pulsed softly, signaling a moment of significance. "Today," Xyra announced, her voice clear and commanding, We recognize the human who has shown us the power of patience, observation, and strategy. This human, though silent, has demonstrated intelligence beyond our expectation. He has revealed that strength is not only in words, force, or technology, but in the careful understanding of the world and those around us. The court was silent, eyes wide, as Zira gestured toward Elias. He has taught us that even the smallest, seemingly fragile species can possess wisdom that rivals our own. Let this be a lesson. Intelligence, patience, and courage are the greatest strengths of all. Elias remained silent, his gaze steady. In that moment, his silence spoke louder than any words ever could. Later, in a private conversation, Zira approached him once more. "You have changed the perception of your species in ways I never imagined," she said. "I laughed at your silence, thinking it weakness. I mocked your species. Yet you have shown me that humans possess patience, intelligence, and resilience beyond expectation. I respect you, human." Elias tilted his head slightly. Still, no words. His silence had carried his message, and it had been heard. The Queen offered him a unique position, bridging human and Zetharian relations. Elias, still silent in words, had achieved what no one believed possible. He had won respect, influence, and recognition through patience, observation, and intelligence. In the quiet of the palace, Elias reflected on his journey. From the moment he had been captured, through trials of strength, perception, and strategy, he had relied on silence as a shield and a tool. He had observed, learned, and acted with precision, and now his silent strategy had achieved victory, not through violence, not through words, but through intelligence and patience. Outside, the Zetharian city shimmered with energy, vibrant and alive. Ships moved like living creatures, energy flowed in harmonious streams, and the palace pulsed with power. Yet within that beauty, Elias had proven a fundamental truth. Humans, though small and seemingly fragile, could match any species in intelligence, patience, and strategy. The Queen had laughed at his silence once. Now she understood that silence could be stronger than any weapon. Patience could outmatch pride, observation could outmaneuver power, and intelligence could surpass even the greatest displays of technology. Elias had not only survived, he had changed the course of history, creating a bridge between humans and Zetharians, and proving that true strength often lay where others least expected it, in the quiet mind of a human who refused to be underestimated. The silent observer had triumphed.